Hello and welcome back to the Wee Larder channel. Today I'm going to be making a traditional Scottish Yule Bannock. So this is a bannock that traditionally would have been made around the Christmas period, and traditionally they would have split it in four and put the symbol of the cross on, but there is evidence to show that it actually goes back to pagan times as well, especially with the pinched edges around the shortbread, which were apparently to symbolise the sun, and it goes right back to sun worship and things. So it's quite interesting. It's quite an old tradition, and this recipe that I'm making is actually made with beremeal and flour. It's closer to your modern day shortbread than it is the old traditional bannock. Traditionally they would have been made with oatmeal. So it's really nice, and it's flavoured with candied peel and cherries and almonds and things, and cinnamon as well. So it's a real Christmassy Yule Bannock. You could call it a shortbread because it's very similar to a modern day shortbread, and that's where our modern day shortbread apparently descended from as well, so that's quite interesting. So this recipe is so easy. You can get a copy on my website if you want to print it out. Sometimes I like to have the printed copy when I'm doing my cooking as well. So let's get started on our traditional Scottish Yule Bannock. So for this Scottish Yule Bannock, you're going to need 225 grams of white flour, 225 grams of beremeal, 25 grams of chopped cherries, 25 grams of mixed peel, 50 grams of sliced almonds, 110 grams of icing sugar, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of mixed spice, a teaspoon of vanilla, 225 grams of unsalted butter, 4 tablespoons of milk, and some caster sugar to sprinkle as well. Now I've actually used spelt flour for my white flour. You can just use normal plain flour if you want to, and if you can't get your hands on beremeal, you can use 450 grams of white flour instead as well. So we're just going to start by sieving our flour into the bowl just to remove any lumps. So I'm just using my spoon to get all the lumps out of the flour, and as I mentioned in the ingredients, if you're not using beremeal for whatever reason, you can just use all flour for this recipe. So you would have 450 grams of flour going in here. So we're just getting all the lumps out of our flour so that it's nice and light and airy, and then we're going to add in our beremeal. Now this beremeal is actually milled up in Orkney in a place called Barony Mill, and I'm hoping to visit at some point when we can travel a bit further, and I'm really looking forward to going to Orkney as well. Such a beautiful place. But this has been milled there for over 300 years, so it's a real ancient Scottish grain, and it's just a real nutritious ingredient as well. It's something I would definitely recommend checking out. So we have our white flour and our beremeal sieved into the bowl, and we're just going to mix those through really well. Obviously, if you're just using white flour, you don't need to do that. We're just going to add in our cherries and our mixed peel as well. And these are quite sticky, so just be careful when you're removing them from the bowl. They do tend to stick to everything. And we're just going to sprinkle in our sliced almonds as well. And once we have our almonds, our cherries and our peel, we're just going to stir everything through really well, just so that it's well distributed throughout the flours. And now we're just going to add in our icing sugar. So this is really important to sieve this, because I quite often get lumps in my icing sugar, especially if it's been sitting in the cupboard for a while. And we're just going to add in our spices. So we're going to add in our cinnamon and our mixed spice. So I'm just measuring by eye. You can use some measuring spoons if you want to. And I've actually added my vanilla in here as well, and the salt, but I somehow skipped the vanilla in the video. So I've actually melted my butter in a pan, and I'm just adding it into the flour here. Now I've actually melted it in the cast iron pan that I'm going to be using to put the bannock into the oven, and that just makes sure that my cast iron pan is really well greased. But you could just use a normal saucepan if you don't have a flat cast iron pan. And we're just going to mix the butter through really well. Now it does get quite sticky, so I am actually just making sure that I have it all off of the spoon here, and we're just going to knead it into a dough. So I've actually included 4 tablespoons. I put 2 tablespoons in here, and I added a little bit extra at the end as well. So it was roughly 4 tablespoons of milk. You might need a little bit more, you might need a little bit less, but what you're looking for is a really smooth, firm but still soft dough. So you're actually going to get 2 bannock cakes out of this. So I'm just flouring my chopping board here, and then we're going to split our dough in 2. So I'm just going to put half aside for later, and we're going to roll out this half on my well floured chopping board. Just make sure you've got plenty of flour on there, because you really don't want this to stick. So you just need to roll that out into the shape of the tray or pan that you're putting in the oven. You just want a really nice round shape. So I'm just using my hands here as well, just to shape this into a nice round circle. And I'm actually using my cast iron pan to put this into the oven, but you can use a baking tray as well. It really doesn't matter. And I'm just scoring the bannock cake just ever so slightly. I'm not cutting all the way through, I'm just scoring on the top so that we know the sections to cut once it is cooked. So please be careful that you don't score all the way through, otherwise you will cut pieces off. And I'm just using my thumbs just to decorate the edges. You can actually pinch the edges if you want to as well, and we're just using a fork there to make holes on the top. So this needs to be very carefully popped onto our cast iron tray. So I'm just sliding it off the chopping board here and hoping for the best. No, I'm sliding it off very carefully, and I'm going to pop it onto my cast iron pan. And I'm just going to bake that in the oven at 160 for about 25 to 30 minutes. Just keep an eye on it, and you just want to get a nice golden colour on the top. You don't want to cook it for too long though. So once it's ready, I am sprinkling it with some orange peel and some more chopped cherries just for decoration. You don't have to add these pieces on the top, but I just think they look really pretty and Christmassy. And you might notice I've also got my jacket on by this point, because it was actually getting really cold in our kitchen that day. And we're just going to sprinkle the top of our hot bannock with caster sugar, and it is ready to serve. So when you're ready to cut up your bannock, you can actually just use the guided score marks that we made on the top to slice it up into nice wedges. Now this is just so delicious on its own, but if you want to, you could serve it up with a little bit of custard. But it's just so delicious with a nice cup of tea. So I'm just cutting up all my segments, and then I'm going to pop them onto a plate to cool. And that's our traditional Scottish Yule Bannock, and it's so good. So I hope you enjoyed making your traditional Scottish Yule Bannock. I'd love to see a photo of it. If you did take a picture and you're on Instagram, please feel free to tag me in your pictures, and I'd love to share them to my stories as well. And if you're new here as well and you enjoyed this video, please feel free to hit subscribe, and if you hit that little bell next to it, you'll be notified of my new videos coming out in the future. So take care, and I will see you all again soon. Lots of love. Bye.